Agriculture and forestry are highly exposed to the consequences of rising global temperatures. Increased seasonal disturbances disrupt agricultural cycles, and there are changes in rainfall patterns and extreme weather events such as heat waves, droughts, storms, and floods, which pose considerable challenges. In light of that, SBTi has a way around it all. In this video, we'll discuss their plans in detail. Make sure you stick with me to the end. Without any further delay, let's get into it. The SBTi launches a method to cover the emissions and absorptions of the Earth. The Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTi, the global body that enables companies to set emission reduction targets based on science, today launches the world's first standard method for companies to set science-based targets that include reduction and elimination of emissions from land. The Science-Based Targeting Guide for Forests, Land, and Agriculture, FLAG, provides companies in land-intensive sectors such as food, agriculture, and forestry with the tools to perform its role in preventing the catastrophic impacts of climate change. This sector accounts for nearly a quarter, that's about 22% of global greenhouse gas (GHG) emissions, the largest emitter after energy. More than 410 companies with intensive land use operations have committed or set targets through the SBTi, and almost half publicly report greenhouse gas emissions. 38% have committed to setting net zero targets. However, few take into account emissions from land, that is, emissions from forestry and agricultural production, land use change, and land management, including vehicle and fertilizer production on farms, in their targets or statements due to the lack of guidance and methods available so far. The SBTi FLAG Guide enables companies to understand how to accelerate the decarbonization of emissions from the Earth to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Martha Stevenson, World Wildlife Fund, WWF Senior Director and Senior Advisor to the SBTi, said that the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the wood used in the houses we live in, and the medicines that heal us are available from the forests, land, and agriculture that sustain us. However, the commercialization of our natural environment is a major source of emissions and is also the sector most vulnerable to the effects of global warming. Heat waves and droughts have become more frequent and intense. Storms have become stronger and floods more destructive. This is already causing serious damage to ecosystems, threatening food security, human health, businesses, and economies around the world, especially in emerging countries. Reducing emissions from land must be a top priority if we want to stop the worst effects of the climate crisis and make the most vulnerable communities stronger. Companies are now invited to commit to setting FLAG science-based targets to send a credible signal that the sector is ready, willing, and able to decarbonize and to encourage local, regional, and national policies to raise the level of climate ambition. Emissions from the FLAG sector must be reduced by 72% by 2050. Is this even achievable? Companies in sectors that are land-intensive, such as food or forestry, or those whose land-related emissions contribute 20% or more of their total emissions, will now be required to set FLAG science-based targets. In addition to a short-term FLAG target covering immediate emission reductions for the next 5 to 10 years, companies are encouraged to develop a long-term FLAG target in order to achieve deep emission reductions of at least 72% before 2050, in line with the SBTi net zero standard. Next up, let's talk about the top priorities of the SBTi, which is to reduce emissions from deforestation and enhance carbon sinks. The SBTi recognizes the climate mitigation potential of all changes in land use. Stopping deforestation, on the other hand, accounts for roughly 80% of the 4.6 gigaton mitigation potential of land use change. So, in addition to including all these emissions in the target-setting framework, the SBTi FLAG Guide requires companies to commit to no deforestation by 2025. More than half of the mitigation opportunities in the land sector come from carbon removal activities. Therefore, in addition to setting targets to reduce emissions from land, the SBTi FLAG Guide requires companies to consider GHG removals, such as soil carbon sequestration and improved forest management in their short-term goals. Removals are not a substitute for deep emission reductions. Krista Anderson, Director of WWF and co-director of the SBTi FLAG project, said that the next few years are crucial in their efforts to tackle the climate crisis, and this guidance addresses the 22% of global emissions that have been largely ignored to date. The food, land, and agriculture sectors have the potential to reduce emissions and enhance carbon sinks at the rate necessary to maintain the goal of limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees Celsius. If we want to have a sustainable future in the future, companies should use this advice in their plans and act now to stop deforestation and improve land management. The FLAG Science-Based Targeting Guide was developed in consultation with business, academics, and civil society, including a public consultation that received more than 1,600 comments from more than 165 organizations. In other news, Mexico and Germany strengthen actions to reduce GHG emissions from sewage. After implementing the Water and Sanitation Services Companies for Climate Change Mitigation project in Mexico, promoted by the joint initiative of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, and the International Water Association, IWA, in coordination with the National Water Commission, 3 water service operating agencies managed to reduce 2,500 tons of carbon dioxide per year, which is equivalent to planting 12,400 trees in the same period. For this reason, this achievement will now be replicated in other operating agencies as part of Mexico's international commitments related to climate change mitigation. The Deputy General Director of Administration, Alejandra Isela Martinez Rodriguez, and the Deputy General Director of Potable Water, Drainage and Sanitation, Felipe Zararen Mendoza, both from Conagua, agreed on this during the closing event of the Water and Sanitation Services Companies for Climate Change Mitigation project activities. Felipe Zararen Mendoza explained that implementing this project in the intermunicipal systems for wastewater treatment and disposal services for the municipalities of El Rincon and potable water and sewage of San Francisco del Rincon, Guanajuato, as well as the Junta Municipal Water and Sanitation of the Municipality of Chihuahua, is a part of the international commitments of Conagua focused on the mitigation of greenhouse gases, GHG, and adaptation to climate change. He stressed that Conagua, through the area under its charge, has developed various mitigation actions in the waste sector, thereby contributing to the fight against climate change. In this context, he pointed out that thanks to this project, it was possible to establish concrete actions to measure and reduce GHG emissions related to the management of sewage. To this end, Conagua provided technical support, approaches, and tools to the aforementioned utilities to help them monitor and reduce their GHG emissions while improving their ability to adapt to climate change. He announced that, based on this collaboration, the GIZ has made available to Conagua and operating agencies products such as the Roadmap for Decarbonization, climate change risk management plans, the application of the tool evaluation and monitoring of energy performance and carbon emissions, a study on national and international climate financing sources for water and sanitation utilities in Mexico, as well as online training. He explained that with this, it is also sought to increase the coverage of wastewater treatment, optimize sanitation, recover nutrients, and, if possible, generate energy. During the event, in which the manager of international cooperation of Conagua, Esther Martinez Bajena, signed the letter of termination of the activities and recommendations of the Water and Sanitation Services Companies for Climate Change Mitigation project, Alejandra Isela Martinez Rodriguez asserted that the application of this program will be very beneficial both for Mexico as well as for Jordan and Peru, countries where it is also implemented. Martinez Rodriguez emphasized that promoting projects like this becomes essential in the work of Conagua, for which she thanked the collaboration of GIZ and expressed the willingness of her area to support in all that corresponds to replicating achievements such as the one achieved, which will contribute to building a better future in terms of water for future generations. Esther Martinez Bajena pointed out that the first phase of this project began in 2013 and the second in 2019, to conclude today with the delivery of the products resulting from these years of continuous work. She stated that the Water and Sanitation Services Companies for Climate Change Mitigation project is a clear example of the success of such cooperation, since it demonstrates the way in which the water sector can contribute both to climate change mitigation and adaptation to it, using an integrated approach to the water cycle. This is due to the fact that the operating agencies participating in the project were able to reduce operating costs and improve productivity thanks to the increased coverage of wastewater treatment, generating a 40% reduction in their GHG emissions. At the time, the director of the GIZ Climate Cluster, Philip Schukat, acknowledged that during the 9 years of cooperation around the Water and Sanitation Services Companies for Climate Change Mitigation project, Conagua materialized its interest in analyzing the issue of climate change and worked accordingly to identify the opportunities that exist to mitigate the emissions of the utilities. He welcomed the fact that one of the products resulting from this effort remains available to be made available to utilities and thereby makes the link between the water sector and climate change more visible both nationally and locally. That concludes today's video. If you found the video helpful, please do consider giving us a thumbs up and don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. See you next time.